Now that you know about unit testing and what are unit test cases, let us see what exactly do we test during unit testing phase, and also let's examine what are the characteristics of good unit test cases. So let's begin with what do we try to test. Now when we are doing unit test cases, we do pass necessary data to the test case in order to execute a test. Now there are, based on the type of data that we are passing to the code in order to test it, we can classify the unit test cases into three types. One is pass case scenarios. Now pass case scenarios are the scenarios where we are giving it a valid input value, and for that valid input value we know what is the expected outcome, and hence we can verify the expected outcome. The second scenario is fail case scenario. Fail case scenario is that unit test case as part of which, when I pass the data, I pass such a data that the output of the unit test case should fail, which means that the code should not return me the expected value for a given input. I know that, and I'll still pass that value to the code and to verify how exactly does it behave. There is still a certain expected behavior, because when something goes wrong or because of invalid data or for any other reason, at least the software should exit as gracefully as possible. The third type of scenarios are called borderline scenarios or edge cases. These type of test cases are used typically when you are dealing with data types that are numerical in nature or are strings or arrays, which, in other words, the data types that have got a range of values or a size of how many elements do they store. In such cases, you will pass a value which will test this range. Like for example, if you want to test an integer value, so if you want to test a method that is using an integer somewhere, so you would try to pass the integer value which is the highest possible value that it can support, or the lowest possible value it can support. In this way we are testing the unit case for the edge cases. So that kind of talks about the type of test cases that we would run during the unit tests. So now let us look at the characteristics of good unit test cases. Now good unit test cases should be fast. The execution should be as fast as possible, because here you're just giving the necessary data to the code and then just getting the value back and testing it. So the next characteristic of a good unit test case is repeatable. I should be able to run the unit test cases repeatedly, either at regular intervals or at any other different types of intervals. What it means is that when I run them repeatedly, the results should still remain the same, which means because of this test I should not add any side effects. The third point is isolated. Isolated is a characteristic that comes into picture when you are using mocking, which means that you are trying to test a unit which is getting some data from an external source through some service or through using some service. The next characteristic is maintainable. By maintainable, we mean that the test cases should do minimal things. I mean, the code for the test cases should be minimal, because all that a unit test case is doing is it is just about providing the necessary data and calling the method that is being tested. And then once the once the result is obtained, it just checks the result for desired behavior. And the last characteristic is trustworthy. By trustworthy, what we mean is test cases should not fail randomly. Now, in case you are part of a complex software project where multiple teams and multiple people are working on, and a lot of mocking and all is used, in such cases there are chances that slightly wrongly written unit test cases could result in random failures.